The research is literally called Swallowed by a Black Hole. I was going to read it. Now, this is a piece of research that's been brought out recently by Brunel University in London, and seeing a piece of research about endometriosis that doesn't tackle whether or not we're attractive enough is music to my ears. I want to take you through the study and my thoughts, and just to get your opinions on it too, because I do not know how women living with angry uterus go to work full time and deal with this shit on a regular basis. Hats off to you. Because the thought of having to put a smile on my face and pretend like everything is fine for an entire day whilst my uterus felt like it was being scraped out with a rusty spoon does not appeal to me at all. So the stats show there's more people leaving work than ever. I think a survey was done in Australia and 1 in 6 people have left work who have endometriosis because the pain is that bad. The context for this is that as a coach, I spend a lot of time working with people who are stressed and overwhelmed at work and trying to find ways to deal with all of the stuff that they are given on a day-to-day basis. I often talk to my clients about focusing on the things that we can and cannot control at work. And this is especially relevant when it comes to dealing with things like burnout, overwhelm and stress. Now, systemic change within an organisation can take years, even decades. So it's easy to get caught up in the things that we can't control rather than focusing on the things that we do. However, I hadn't really appreciated this as much from an endometriosis perspective. The research, it really gave me more of an understanding. It gave me a sense of validation, but then also just anger, because from the research, the report, it tells us what we already know, which is that the workplace is not set up for people who have chronic health conditions and chronic pelvic pain. It's just not set up for those people. And the uncomfortable truth is that the world of work is primarily set up for middle-aged white men. Like, no offence to the middle-aged white men, but it feels like this is like a recurring theme throughout society. But it's a conversation for a whole different podcast and YouTube video, and get so frustrated. But then looking at this information and then seeing what's happening when I'm talking to people in the Angry Uterus Club community about how they are being dismissed and gaslit and having to jump through hoops that they are not capable of jumping through because of these chronic health conditions, I feel like the workforce just needs to catch up and just needs to kick up the backside to get moving forward. Because, and I think this is a frustrating thing, it's not that people who are in chronic pelvic pain do not want to work. Far from it. It's the system, the job roles, the expectations are ones that we can never meet because of what we have to deal with. So it then comes down to, how can we make the workforce more equitable? And what do we need to put in place to make sure that we have the same level of access to platforms and systems and additional things that we need in order to bring us up in line with the middle-aged white man. And I think, that's where a lot of the anger comes from, amongst other things. The research itself was undertaken by 26 women, and it was a mix of qualitative and quantitative data. What was really nice to see is that it was from a mix of people from different demographics, different backgrounds. They had been dealing with endometriosis symptoms 10 years, 6 months, 17 years. Like, there was a big breadth of people involved in the study, which I think was really great. And I know that if the numbers were 2,600, we'd probably get the same results, because I feel like that is probably representative of what is going on in the wider world, the wider part of, wider parts of the UK. But the study also admits its shortcomings in the fact that the majority of people that conducted the survey and were part of the research report are white women. And I think it would have been great to have more representation in there, because it's really important that people of colour with these conditions are represented in surveys like this, and just more broadly, but specifically in the research. That's great, but where is the research on and including people of colour in these conversations? Because that is really, really key. Now, There are 6 main themes that they came up with, and they went whilst they were analysing the data. So the first one was around masking and pretending everything's normal. How often do we have to do this on a daily, hourly, minute-by-minute basis? Because this one just really resonated. How many times have you had to do that and just bite your tongue and take deep breaths to be able to appear as though you're okay, because of the implications, what could happen if you're not? And it actually made me think back to something that I used to do. I remember when I worked in corporate and we were like in the office full time. I remember like hiding my tampon up my sleeve, feel embarrassed or embarrass anybody else. Because what if I was going to bump into a colleague or a male colleague who might be put off by seeing that I had a tampon in my hand? I mean, I feel like now I'd just be like waving that tampon around to show them that I'm off to the bathroom. Okay, maybe not that. Definitely that I think I would approach differently now, but just kind of questioning like, why is it that we did that? Why was I trying to make sure that other people didn't feel awkward with what I was doing was completely normal and natural by having a period? And I think from conversations that I've had with people in the community, this stuff is the hardest part. So the putting on the face, the pretending everything's fine, you're gaslighting yourself essentially into thinking that you're okay just so you can get on with things. Aimed by like the community and people, that's actually harder than dealing with pain. Because don't get me wrong, the pain is absolutely unbearable, but you know what you're dealing with. Whereas having to do all the extra stuff on top of that just makes it all that harder to deal with the pain that you have to deal with as well. Okay, so silence and disclosure was the next theme that came up. And this was really heartbreaking because there are so many people out there that don't feel comfortable and confident and haven't got the right environment to feel like they can share what is going on for them and what they're dealing with. It said like because of the implications of what would happen if they're not okay, that they don't want it to affect their career progression, where they're going, you know, projects that they're working on. So that is really sad to read about. Like, I am an open book. I always have been. When I had my breakdown and I went back to work after 3 months, I chose to disclose to people in the team about what happened. Look, this is it. This is what's going on. Now, I know I am an outlier in that respect, and that's just what I've chosen to do. But there are a lot of people who don't feel comfortable doing that, and that is fine. But we should be able to have the choice of choosing whether or not we disclose something, not because it could affect our job, but because we just don't want to share it. The study found that it wasn't just the individuals that felt like they were silenced because they didn't feel they could share for their career, but also the environments themselves, especially in male-dominated environments where people were led to believe that kind of topics such as like women's health, heaven forbid, were really taboo. It wasn't something that they felt they could openly express because of the reaction that they would get, which is just downright disgusting. And people wonder why I'm angry. Now, the next one that came up, and I didn't know about this, but HR leads and occupational therapists really know what this is. But there is actually an absence score that is used called the Bradford Factor. Now, it's not used by absolutely every organisation, but I know a lot of organisations do use it. And it basically scores you the amount of absences that you have rather than necessarily the length of an absence, and you are kind of marked down because of the amount of absences that you have. So for example, a woman having problems with endometriosis or adenomyosis, it might be cyclical. It might mean that every month they take 2 days off work sick. That would trigger conversations to happen because of how the score is structured over somebody else who had 2 to 3 weeks off all at once. So it's just really frustrating because the system that people use is rigged against people who are dealing with these cyclical chronic health conditions and in that way. And I didn't even realise it was a thing. So that doesn't, again, help people who aren't able-bodied and don't live with a chronic health condition. Another thing that came out was that careers were felt to be made smaller and to feel smaller because of the opportunities that people had to turn down and missed out on because of what was happening, or because of what could potentially happen in the future. Like, a lot of people don't know when an endo flow is going to come. So do they feel comfortable putting themselves forward for a big project or a promotion if they know that it could be derailed by a massive endo flare, which means they have to take weeks off work? So the study actually found that people were turning down promotions, deciding to go part-time, leaving organisations completely because they weren't able to keep up with the work. And it wasn't because people lacked ambition, because the roles demanded particular constraints and approaches which just couldn't be upheld by people who were dealing with endometriosis on a regular basis. One of the things that comes up again and again is dealing with endometriosis at work, and endometriosis generally is never just about the physical pain that we're going through, but has so many other layers as well. There's the guilt of feeling like you're letting your team down, that you are not, doing your fair share of work, that you are feeling like you're a burden. The kind of trying to preempt when things are going to happen, but knowing that that is just not how it works. All of that additional mental load takes its toll. And if a workplace is only really equipped to deal with when we have pain sometimes, not all the time, but not everything else as well, then that's when it's going to fall down completely. Another thing that I didn't even know about was something called the feminist disability theory. And they looked at the research from the study through that lens. The whole idea behind the feminist disability theory is that the disability is the gap between your body and the world that is set up for a different one. So for example, if you have a broken leg and you are trying to get up a set of stairs, and this is my understanding, by the way, if you have a broken leg and you have to get up a set of stairs, then the disability is the gap between what your body can currently do and the actions that you're trying to take in that situation. So you're trying to go up the stairs. So is there something in place for you to be able to get from that bottom floor to the first floor without having to take the stairs? So that's the gap, rather than it being about you and it's your problem and it's your disability. Actually, the gap is that it's not built for people that have needs above and beyond the norm, whatever the norm is. And this kind of comes into the ideas around paid menstrual leave. And I know there's a lot of work going on at the moment in the UK, especially around being able to have menopause leave as well. But interestingly, the people in the survey said, I think it was 82, let me just double check. Actually, around 80% of people in the study said they would not take menstrual health leave if it was offered. And actually, I think that comes back to the idea that they don't want to be seen as different. They don't want to be seen as having to deal with something else. But that's just really shit. That's just really bad, isn't it? Because you're kind of, your body, you are fighting against your body and it can't do what you want it to do. You're in pain, but if you take the extra things that are offered to you, then it's the judgments around that. So do we just need to give less of a shit and actually be like, you know what? I'm taking all the leave that I can. This is my situation. This is what's happening. This is what I need in order to be successful within my role. This is what needs to change. Like, maybe we just need to take more of a stance like that. And it can feel difficult to have those conversations and we don't want to be seen as different. I get that. But we can't do anything about it. We can manage the symptoms. We can do all of this extra stuff. But ultimately, we're going to have to put things in place to make sure that we can thrive in an environment where our body is fighting against us. And I think actually, like, we think about playing small, but we're already doing more because we are doing the work, we're hitting the targets, we are managing expectations, we're doing all of the bullshit that you have to do in the world of work anyway. Plus, we're adding on the layer of the fact that we are dealing with chronic pelvic pain and it feels like your uterus has been pulled out by a rusty spoon. That is where we're at. So we're already different because we're dealing with all of this stuff on top of everything else. And it's what I talk to my clients about, like what I coach them on, like what you can and can't control. And I think this isn't kind of coming from a blame or a victim mentality, but actually understanding what elements you can control and acknowledging the environments that just simply do not work for us because we have an incredibly angry uterus. And when I say angry uterus, I say it is the collective of talking about chronic pelvic pain conditions, but it's just easier for me to say angry uterus than it is to list off all of the different conditions. The one thing that it does call out as well, which just makes me really angry, and rightly so, is that endometriosis costs the UK £8.2 billion a year, but yet the onus is on us to adjust to a work environment that was never set up with us in mind. And that is just infuriating. So having read all of the research, I am kind of angry, but happy angry, if that makes sense. Ultimately, the research comes down to this, that you're not weak, that you're not incapable, that you are not letting the team down, but actually you are expected and having to work in a system that is not set up for you. And when you get that reframe, that understanding, I think that's when things change. And it's about being able to go in feeling more confident, saying, actually, no, this doesn't work for me because of what is going on. That doesn't mean that I'm bad at my job. It doesn't mean that I'm not a team player. It means that these are the things that I know I need to help me thrive and to do the job you employed me for. If you're made to feel like you are not doing well or you are not performing, because it's definitely not you. You are not the problem. The workplace is. And whilst you might not be able to fix the workplace overnight or even over 6-12 months, there are definitely things that you can do to take back some control. It's what is one small thing that you can do to help yourself as you're going forward and potentially going to have a flare at work and something's going to happen. How can you best prepare for that situation? Is it a conversation that you need to have? Is it an email you need to prepare ahead of time so you've got it in your inbox so you can just press send? But just thinking about one small thing that you can do to help yourself and to look after yourself as well. Obviously, we'd love you to join the Angry Uterus Club. We meet every Tuesday evening, 7 till 8 p.m. for a virtual check-in and chat. We have resources on the website. There is a group chat as well. And it's just a place for you to come where you don't feel alone, you don't feel overwhelmed, and you know that you're not the only one going through it. We're there to help, support, laugh, cry, everything in between, and of course, get a little bit angry. Thank you so much for listening and watching, if you're watching. And I will see you next week. This is going to be a weekly thing now, whether or not I have guests in or whether I do it a little solo chat as well. I'll put everything in the show notes so you can see everything. But yeah, would love to hear your thoughts about the results, about the research, and let's chat. That was a rubbish end, but I'm going. Bye.